What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Victory Podcast. I'm your host, Steve McGrath, and this week I am pleased to bring you Nate Boyer. Now, Nate is a different type of football story. You see, Nate volunteered to go overseas and go to a refugee camp in Darfur after high school. He then joined the Green Berets for 5 years and went reserves while he decided to go to the University of Texas. There, he learned how to long snap. First time he ever played football. Ultimately, works his way to be a starter, starts for 3 years under Mac Brown, and then goes undrafted, but gets a chance to play with the Seattle Seahawks. As a 34-year-old undrafted rookie free agent, he then happens to write open letter to Colin Kaepernick about taking a knee. The letter's published in the Army Times, and from there, he opens dialogue and actually has Colin take a knee as opposed to sit, which is what Colin was originally doing when he started his protest. So Nate talks about this wild ride and everything that happens. But before we jump into that story, I have to remind you all that we are brought to you by Team Builder. Team Builder provides strength and conditioning software to more than 500 high school football programs nationwide, as well as the NFL. So whether you write your own programs, have a full-time strength coach, or need training programs, Team Builder can make your weight room more efficient, more accountable, and smarter when it comes to measuring your team's progress. Right now, Team Builder is offering a free 10-week spread offense tempo training program when you start a 14-day free trial at teambuilder.com. And that's, of course, only when you use the promo code VICTORY. So, without any further ado, here's our conversation with Nate Boyer. One. Boom. I am pleased to welcome on the line Mr. Nate Boyer. Nate, how are you doing today, man?
I'm good, brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing phenomenal. Now, for those that aren't familiar with your story, you are, to the best of my knowledge, the only former Green Beret to go the college route, having never played football, to then become an undrafted free agent, make it to the NFL. And there's just so much to unpack here. And I know that we're going to be a little tight on time, so I'm just going to jump right into it. From what I could tell, 9/11 happened at a pretty formidable time in your life, and you were, I'm sure, influenced on some level by that. But all signs point to, at the age of 23, you go to the refugee camp in Darfur. Can you just talk a little bit about being 18 to 23 in that time frame, how you were thinking about what you wanted to do with your life, and sort of how did you get on this path?
Yeah. I graduated high school in 99 and I moved down to San Diego and was working on a fishing boat. I was thinking about maybe being a firefighter. That was something that was interesting to me as far as a job. But I didn't really know what I wanted. I didn't have much of a direction as far as, like, not that I wasn't offered one from my parents. I had a very, very loving family, two successful parents that pushed me, but I just sort of rebelled at all costs, man. And I just didn't know, what I was really interested in besides sports. I mean, sports were just always my love. And so I moved down there, started working, and then ended up coming up to Los Angeles because I was interested in film and television. And I didn't really know where to start there either. Wasn't going to ask my parents to send me to film school or anything because I wasn't even 100% committed to it. And then I started, just doing odd jobs up here, and then I'm 20 years old, 9/11 happens. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of things and got me kind of thinking about the military, but I still didn't join for various reasons. And then a couple of years after that, I ended up coming across a Time magazine article talking about the tragedy in Sudan and the genocide going on at Darfur. And I just felt moved by that, wanted to help in some way, wanted to go over there and fight for those people in some way. And so I flew myself over on I didn't fly myself, but I bought a ticket over to Chad, the neighboring country, and sort of talked my way onto a UN flight to get out to the refugee camps, and was able to volunteer there for a couple of months. And, it completely changed my life, man. It was just amazing how grateful those people were, how they had nothing, and, were dealing with, insanity, basically. I mean, most of the men were off fighting or had been killed already that were had their families at these camps, and simply because they believe something a little bit different and have a different, tone of skin color. And I just wanted to fight for people like that, the oppressed, free the oppressed, which is the Special Forces motto. And that's what led me to the military. My last week in the Darfur, I got malaria and was listening to the Second Battle of Fallujah, sort of the play-by-play of the Marines going to war there, and I felt inspired to want to be a part of that. And so I came back home and found out the 18 X-ray program, the Army Special Forces, and I signed up, and fortunate to make it through and become a Green Beret.
That's wild. And I mean, it's pretty, at least to me, pretty easy to sort of trace those dots of how you could go from volunteering your time to wanting to get involved in the military. But to join the Special Forces is obviously something very few can ever do. And you make it, and you do it for 5 years. So in sort of a 6-year span, I've imagined that now you've seen more than most ever do. And I guess this is a little bit bigger picture, but how do you take that and then sort of assimilate yourself into being a college student? So maybe 2 parts there. How did you assimilate? And then also, what made you decide, you know what, I'm going to apply to University of Texas and, go ahead and pursue this?
Yeah, I mean, football was my favorite sport. Growing up, I never played it. Played every other sport pretty much, but football never worked out. When I was younger, my mom didn't want me to play, and then by the time I got to high school, I was just so wrapped into these other sports. I, was afraid to try out, and maybe I wouldn't be that good, or I would ruin an opportunity that I had playing something else. So I just never did it, and I regretted that. So then at 28, 29, coming off of active duty into the National Guard and going to school, I figured wherever I go, I'm going to try out for the football team. And I ended up, applying and being accepted to the University of Texas, which has an incredible program and history. And so I ended up going there. It was the only place I applied, and I went to, football tryouts the first week of school, and didn't really know what position I'd be playing. Figured I'd be a safety or a long snapper, safety or a wide receiver. I didn't even know what a long snapper was yet, and walked on as a safety. Spent that first year on the scouts team, and then started long snapping just to find a way on the field. And it was great. That school, the university, Austin, I wouldn't have changed anything if I could do it again, even though we were never a great team when I was there. We were a good team, but never great. But it was an incredible experience, and I was able to sort of transfer all those skills I learned in the military as far as the work ethic and, putting the reps in to get something done and being a good teammate, playing for the man next to you, all those things, were able to contribute to, me having a little bit of success there.
Yeah. And, you beat me right to the punch, because as we'll get into with merging vets and players, but there's so much overlap between the military and athletics. And you just talked about how a lot of what you were doing is a transferable skill set to now playing a sport. Obviously, there's a lot of stark differences as well. But what was it like? So you're in the National Guard. What was it like for you, learning how to long snap on your own, half a world away? But beyond that, flipping that switch. You're in, a foxhole in 100+ degree heat, in actual danger. And then you have to go now with, a bunch of, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids who are playing a sport. How was that transition like for you, just sort of going from one extreme to the next?
I mean, it was different for sure. There was stuff that was frustrating, but also I had to maintain perspective and understand that, a lot of they're kids that are going to school, a lot of them, it wasn't so much with my teammates, but sometimes other college students just didn't seem to appreciate certain things and all that. But hey, that's how I felt when I was their age too. And they had a different perspective than me. And so it just, it was because of my experiences that I felt that way, and I can't pretend that everybody's supposed to have same feelings and emotions I do if they haven't experienced the same things as I have. But also it was just a good opportunity to learn. I actually wanted to go to school. I wanted to receive that education. And at the end of the day, we're all pretty much the same, man. We're not that different. I found so many more commonalities than differences with the guys that I played with and with the kids I went to school with and all that stuff. And, I had a great college experience. But it was an interesting transition, especially since I stayed in the National Guard. I would deploy every summer. So going back overseas to Afghanistan and then coming back home, it's just, it's different. It's different in different places for sure.
So when you were deployed, were you getting any weird looks from guys while you're practicing long snapping?
Not really. I'd kind of find a nice private place to do it though. But my last trip to Afghanistan, I remember being down there. They had this like old dirt soccer field on the Afghan side of the base that we were at. And so the Afghans would come out and they'd watch me do it. They'd watch me snap, and I'm sure they were like, what is this weirdo doing? But it was just something that felt normal to me. I had to practice. But I'm sure to a lot of people, the onlookers, it was odd, man. The guy out there by himself, snapping footballs into a goalpost. It's probably pretty weird.
Now, so you do that. You earned the starting job, and for essentially 3 years, you are the long snapper. So obviously that time that you put into it, regardless of how you might have looked to some of the outsiders, paid off. So I know your story is pretty well documented that, you go undrafted, but at 34 years old, you do eventually sign with the Seattle Seahawks. What was it? Now, let's call it for what it is. 5'11", 220 pounds, not exactly the prototypical size of an offensive lineman or special teamer. I'm sure you didn't let it deter you in any way, but, how certain were you that you were even going to get a shot once you were past the collegiate level?
Not sure at all, especially seeing as in college, I only weighed about 190 or 195. I put all that weight on just to get a shot at the NFL. And it was, I wasn't sure at all. I was 34, it was going to be a 34-year-old rookie. So whoever was going to take a chance on me was going to be taking a big chance, So, but I was appreciative for the opportunity, and I got to play in the preseason and gave it everything I had, and I did really well. It just wasn't quite enough at the end of the day, but that's just the way that is. The guy that beat me out, he'd been with the team 6 years. He was very good. It's not like he was bad at his job.
Yeah, right.
So I was up against it, But just to get a shot was pretty incredible.
So when you look back at your time as a professional athlete, outside of actually being on the field and getting a chance to be part of the team and do your job, do you have like any one particular memory or certain things that just you treasured the most about that experience?
Running the flag out before the games was pretty big for me. I loved doing that. Felt like I was representing the men and women that were still fighting overseas, those that had paid the ultimate sacrifice, in my country. It was an honor to do that. I got to do that in college for every game, and then at the Seahawks, one home game I played in Seattle, they asked me to run the flag out of the tunnel and lead the team out, and that was pretty special too, man. So that was always my favorite part. The game itself, of course, is fun. I like getting hit. I like pressure. I like those moments. And it made me feel alive. But that moment before the game was always the most important to me.
Yeah. What's next here? Probably a pretty obvious transition. Moments before the game, of course, everything with Colin Kaepernick happens. You're approached by, was it the Army Times to write a letter, which is something, of course, that you ultimately do. Looking back at it, I did want to ask, of course, it's your letter. Did you allow anyone to sort of edit it? How long did it take you to put together your thoughts that's something that was obviously ultimately going to get out there and be something that Colin would see?
Yeah, I think I wrote that thing in about an hour, maybe a little more, but not much time. And that was sort of the deal with the Army Times. I had a lot of publications reach out, but I only agreed to do it if I could write it in an open letter format. And, I ultimately was the editor as well. And they agreed to let me do that. I had other bigger publications that I just didn't feel comfortable in, and I was worried that it was going to be, my words were twisted or taken out of context. And so I wrote it with them, and Colin reached out after he read the letter. I mean, it went pretty viral the next day. It was like all over the place. A lot of media personalities and journalists and celebrities, a lot of them shared it because it was important to them. A lot of athletes shared it. It was just something that, like, they thought people needed to hear. It was someone that had a different perspective, but also was like willing to listen and be open-minded about the situation.
Yeah.
And Colin ended up reaching out and wanting to sit down and meet.
In a lot of ways, in hindsight, you were the perfect person. You had the pedigree, but you were open-minded enough and not, you didn't degrade him. It was just enough of and that's why I wanted to ask how long did it take, because it was a pretty well nuanced letter that obviously was well received. And how surprised were you that he did receive it so well and he did want to talk? And, what was just, once you had a chance to meet him, how did you just sort of perceive him and what he was doing? And just what were your general thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting meeting. We both just have different opinions and ideas about things and different backgrounds, but we got a lot in common too. And when you sit down in a room with somebody, I mean, I've done it overseas, in the Middle East with people that I disagree with on many fundamental levels and have different cultural and customary differences and even language barriers over there, but we still have so much more in common. And at the end of the day, we want the same things. We want what's best for our families, for our society, for our country, for the most part. I mean, that's what I want, and I'm pretty sure that's what Colin wants too.
Sure.
So how can we listen to one another, appreciate what's important to us, and work together to solve some of these problems? Because there's no doubt that, like, no matter what it is, we could always do better as a nation. We could do better in law enforcement. We could do better in the military. We can do better. Athletes can do better. And so, like, why would I not at least engage in that conversation and be willing to sort of listen and find some common ground and find ways that we can work together to make this place the best? Because it is a great place. I'd always want to see it. I'm always going to always be part of wanting to see it be better.
Definitely. Now, do you have any thoughts on how things have transpired since then in your involvement? Not that necessarily a whole bunch has changed, or have you kind of sort of just, you let your moment come and go and you more or less have sort of checked out of, what Colin and different guys like Kenny Stills or Eric Reed are doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely carrying on, and there's quite a bit of guys in the league that are doing a lot of good stuff and trying to be a part of this change. And, I'm most proud of the guys that are willing to work alongside law enforcement and they're getting involved with law enforcement in these communities. I had an opportunity to do some work with Matt Forte last year up in Chicago in the South Side. He's working with the police chief up there. I know Kenny Stills is involved in programs like that. Doug Baldwin is a great example in Seattle, someone whose father was a police officer and served in the military. And but also they feel like, we can't let when these things happen, there can't be any repercussions for the law enforcement officers that are making these bad decisions. And I don't disagree with that. I want better training. I want people to be held accountable, of course. But at the same time, there's also got to be that recognition of the difficulty of that job, how hard that is, what a sacrifice you have to make to work in law enforcement, not just with your safety, but with financially. It's a tough gig. And right now, the more we're demonizing and saying, calling it all, law enforcement's fault when something like this happens, and not recognizing all the good work that they do. Like, who's going to want to be a cop? You know what I mean? Who's going to want to take on that job if we're just going to point fingers every time they make a mistake? It's like long snapping, man. No one ever thanked me for doing the good snaps. You know what I mean? It's a thankless job.
Absolutely.
And we've got to we've got to make sure that the law enforcement officers don't feel that way, that what they do is thankless until they make a mistake, and everybody, wants to freak out about it. So, like I said, there's a lot of players in the league that are doing that. They're part of that.
Definitely.
And that's good to see.
Yeah, and I have friends and family that are cops, so I have some skin in the game, and I could not agree more with every single word that you just said. But, I just wanted to transition now to a little bit bigger picture things. Mac Brown and Pete Carroll are the two head coaches that you've played under. And just when it comes to being a leader, particularly of men, what do you see as common traits in successful leaders, in particularly, in your time in the military as well, looking at both realms, both sports and military, what traits do you look for the most effective leaders to have?
I think the best leaders are ones that are, they're willing to, they're obviously they're going to make decisions, they're going to delegate, but then they're also going to get down on their hands and knees and do the work with you. You know what I mean? And they're going to take on those toughest jobs. And that's the most important to me. And sometimes that's not always possible. Like when it's a high level leader, that's just not the reality. It's different if it's your team leader or something like that. But so for those high level leaders, it's ones that are willing to listen to everybody and treat every single person in the company or on the team or in the battalion or whatever it is, the same. They have that equal amount of respect and listening and willing to hear their stories and remember people's names, remember who they are. That's the most valuable. Those are the leaders you want to follow, people that give a damn.
Definitely. No, lastly, as already alluded to, MVP, merging vets and players. I know it's one of a bunch of different things that you have your hand in now, but particularly since we just talked about it with Jerome Sapp, I wanted to mention it. A couple of things he said was, he likes to help guys develop new missions in life, find camaraderie again, stop any sort of cycles of depression that can come with, ending a chapter in your life, whether it be a professional career as an athlete or, of course, in the military. What, if not MVP, what do you have going on right now? What is, where you're putting all your attention these days? Yeah,
first of all, Jerome's a great advocate for what we're a part of, man. He's just a great human being, first and foremost. Obviously, he's an athlete, but, he cares about people. And that's what we're all about, man. We're just about building a community of, people that are successful, are doing well, but also people that are capable of those successes. Maybe they're not doing so hot right now, and they need a little help along the way. We're all equal in that room on a weekly basis. We train together, and then we sit around and we talk about our stuff, man. We talk about the good stuff, the bad stuff we're struggling with, how some of us work through those things, and how we can help one another continue to move forward and find that next mission again. Find another challenge, another way to feel like what we do matters every day. That purpose, and it's just it's a powerful organization, a powerful group. But the number one thing that contributes to struggle, I think, with that transition is the isolation. And feeling like you'll never do anything as important as you did before, and just not being around the tribe anymore. We all need that. It's good for us to also reconnect or connect with the civilian community too. But we need to remember who we are and that we're different, and that's a good thing. But we're also capable of some pretty incredible stuff. And just because you haven't done something before and it's a new profession or skill or whatever, we'll figure it out. We'll find a way. I was able to do that with sports and some other things, and all of us are capable of that wear the uniform. And that goes for athletes as well. We, they sacrifice quite a bit to be elite. It's a different kind of sacrifice, when you were comparing combat to playing a sport, but that camaraderie and fighting for the man on your left and right, those are very similar. And we can all utilize that background in the next phase of life.
Of course. Definitely. Well, Nate, the one thing that I like to end on, with your unique story and path, if you could just give what you would consider to be the best piece of advice, whether it's to, and maybe it would change if it was you talking to a vet versus an 18-year-old kid, but you could give a general piece of advice on how to live your best life and move forward, what would that be?
Man, just live for something bigger. Live for those that didn't make it back. If you are a veteran, some kind of a higher purpose and calling, and everything you do, just be a good person, man. Be nice to people. It's very simple. I think we complicate life way too much. And if you're having trouble finding out what you're passionate about or what you do love, then you got to get out there and try things. You know what I mean? And you got to be okay with, not just okay with, understand that if you want to be great at anything, it's going to take a great amount of failure along the way, because you're going to have to put yourself out there and take some risks. But as far as I know, we only got one shot at this thing, and if you're hesitant, and you're okay with living with regret, I guess that's on you. But I couldn't live that way. I couldn't do it. That scares me more than anything in the world, is that fear of regret. And so I'm always going to, be trying to push myself. And if I'm interested in something or scared of something, to maybe researching it a little bit and checking it out, because it's probably something that I'm drawn to, and that's why I feel those things.
Got it. Well, it certainly resonates with me, but we're definitely on the same wavelength there. Nate, thank you so much for taking the time. Just in closing, where can everyone keep up with you?
It's on social media. I'm just at Nate Boyer 37. I do have a website, nateboyer.com, and Emerging Vets and Players. Fortunate to be a co-founder of that, and you can usually find me involved with various things in our organization. Vetsandplayers.org is the website for that.
Awesome. Nate, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, brother.